So let me call the meeting to order for June 5th, 2018, and show that Councilmember Pierce is absent. She had already advised us that she will be attending a meeting in Florida on behalf of the city. So please rise with me and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar as proposed. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Next up is recognitions and presentations. And tonight we do have a presentation and recognition, and it's on behalf of elder and dependent adult care. And I do have a proclamation I'd like to read, and I believe that is Michelle Cabrillo here, or a representative? Good. You want to come forward, please? We actually have a proclamation. I'll let you actually comment on it. This is what we wanted to do.
Keith. I forgot.
Excuse me. You'd come a couple of months ago and raised this issue and wanted to know if City of Clayton would like to recognize it, and we certainly want to do that, and that's what we're doing tonight. So I'd like to read the proclamation and give you an opportunity to respond to that and have some nice words about the programs. All right? Okay. So this is Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Awareness Month, June 2018. Whereas older adults deserve to be treated with respect and dignity to enable them to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and vital participating members of our communities. And whereas as our population lives longer, we are presented with an opportunity to think about our collective needs and future as a nation. And whereas ageism and social isolation are major causes of elder abuse in the United States, and whereas recognizing that it is up to all of us to ensure that proper social structures exist so people can retain community and societal connections, reducing the likelihood of abuse. And whereas preventing abuse of older adults through maintaining and improving social supports like senior centers, human services, and transportation will allow everyone to continue to live as independently as possible and contribute to the life and vibrancy of our communities. And whereas where there is justice, there can be no abuse. Therefore, Contra Costa County and the City of Clayton urges all people to restore justice by honoring older adults. And whereas join us in engaging and empowering movement and putting an end to abuse. Now therefore, I, Keith Hayden, Mayor, on behalf of the Clayton City Council, do hereby proclaim June 2018 as Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Awareness Month in Clayton, California, and encourage all of our communities to recognize and celebrate older adults and their ongoing contributions to the success and vitality of our country. So I wanted to present both of you with this certificate and proclamation, and I'll let you take some pictures if you want to later, and also address the
I feel odd not facing the audience here, but basically wanted to just make a couple notes and advise the City of Clayton, where I reside, what I do know about elder abuse. And I am a social worker with Adult Protective Services, so I represent the community as well as the services available. Each year, an estimated 5 million older adults are abused, neglected, or exploited. Older Americans lose an estimated $2.6 billion or more annually due to elder financial abuse and exploitation, funds that could be used to pay for the basic needs such as housing, food, and medical care. Unfortunately, it occurs in every demographic, can happen to anyone, family members, neighbors, and even you. It is estimated that only 1 in 5 of these crimes are discovered. In 2017, the City of Clayton had 41 reports of elder and dependent adult abuse and neglect. 32% of those reports involved financial abuse allegations. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, WEAAD, was launched on June 15, 2006 by the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Adult Abuse and the World Health Organization at the United Nations. WEAAD aims to provide an opportunity for communities around the world to promote a better understanding of abuse and neglect of older persons by raising awareness of the cultural, social, and economic and demographic processes affecting elder abuse and neglect. This observance serves as a call to action for individuals, organizations, and communities to raise awareness about elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Lorna Van Akron. I am a Contra Costa County Advisory Council on Aging member, and I just want to say a few more things. We are making elder abuse awareness in Pleasant Hill Senior Center on June 29th in the morning. We will be planting over 4,200 purple flags representing the over 4,200 reported abuse cases last year, which is a 9% increase from the year before. We will also be having a senior resource fair where we'll have adult protective services, district attorney, legal services, all kinds of services for elder adults that they can check in and have questions asked and answered. Then we will be removing the 4,200 flags that night. I told the Pleasant Hill City Council last night. But I do want to invite everybody to be aware of it and perhaps participate. Elder abuse comes in many forms. It's sexual, financial, self-inflicted, emotional. So there's many forms of abuse, but abuse is abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I would like to get you back up here, though. I want to, again, hand the proclamation to you. And as you indicated, this is a growing problem as our population ages, and we wanted to draw attention to that to reinforce what you were talking about as well, and glad that the county is stepping up to this and providing assistance as well as your services as well. So thank you very much. We wanted to present you with this proclamation. All right, thank you very much. Okay. Next up then is reports, and first report then would be from the Planning Commission, Chairman Carl Wolf.
Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, hello. Carl Wolf, the chairperson of your Planning Commission. To report to you about the Tuesday, May 22nd meeting that we held. We held a public hearing with regard to a municipal code amendment with regard to the density plan, including requirements for rental housing projects. We voted to send that to you, and that we recommend that you pass that amendment. There was no public comment with regard to that. Where we did have public comment was on the second amendment, which was in regard to parolee housing being allowed in the city of Clayton. And while the staff did a great job of a presentation, it was felt by the community and by the Planning Commission that we didn't have enough information, and we were only presented with one option with regard to parolee housing in the city, and felt that we needed at least to take another look at something else that we could be presenting to you. So we voted to turn down that amendment and send that to you. So that's my report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
No?
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next up is the Trails and Landscape Committee. Bill Wiggins, Ted Sutterth.
I'll let Ted have that floor since he
Okay.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, well, we met on May 21st, and I'm new to the committee. Ted has also new, but I think he was originally on the committee at one time a few years back. So there was 4 of us there, and Laura was kind of basically helping us along since the chair couldn't make it. So it was myself, Doris Ward, Ted, and who was our 4th one? Carol. And so it was first time for us. So we went over the budget, and I have to say I was very impressed. It was, laid out perfectly. You could kind of find everything you needed in the budget. They explained that each year we're kind of limited as to how much the budget can be increased. 3% is kind of the cap, even if the CPI, which is what it's based on, is higher. So we learned about that. We also learned about some of the projects that weren't completed last year that are being carried forward this year, and we discussed those. One of them is the 18 eucalyptus trees that are in city open space that were identified as being hazards. They need one more quote to be able to proceed with that, and they have that budgeted at $185,000. And then there's the planter boxes downtown, which once the city engineer has time to go over, they're going to perhaps start on that one. That should be this year. All told, there's about $487,000 in different projects that are going to hopefully be done this year. And there's funds available for those because they were actually supposed to be done last year, so that's been carried forward. It is a balanced budget, and it was approved by the committee. Do you have anything to add?
Okay. The only thing I wanted to add is we're starting a rehab of the kiosk downtown. That's really the start of all the trail system. And this week, your mayor and I are removing all the doors, and we're taking them in to get all new glass and get the whole thing fixed up. And then we're going to completely redo the inside. And then Jim Warburton is consented. He's going to do a lot of work on the outside of the kiosk. So by the time we're finished, hopefully before the 4th of July, it's going to really look a lot different and a lot better. So that's what we have.
Good, thank you. And Jim Warburton is our new maintenance supervisor.
Yes.
And I understand you also elected a new vice chair of the Trails and Landscape Committee.
You did.
That's me.
All right, good, congratulations.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the report.
Okay.
Okay, next up would be City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, members of the council. I just have one item. It's a calendaring item with many of the community members here. July 4th this year falls on a Wednesday. We will continue to have our Independence Day parade, and the most popular item, of course, is the Kitty Parade that leads that out. However, there is an opportunity for people to help volunteer. That parade just doesn't happen by itself. In years past, we've had many volunteers. Some of the tasks are easy, some are a little more arduous, but it does help the parade go forward. So it can be as easy as just helping crowd control when the parade comes down near you on the street. Just volunteer to keep the crowd control back so no one gets injured as bigger vehicles go by or whatnot. If you're interested in doing that, that's on our city website. You can go onto the home page under community news, go down to 4th of July, and the volunteer page is there. You can pick what you'd like to do, and I know our city clerk, who basically co-chairs that or chairs it, would appreciate your volunteerism. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other staff reports at this time? No?
Did you want more?
This is your opportunity, other than
I'm
those
fine,
on the agenda.
I'm
Okay.
fine, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Then up at the council level, Councilmember Catalano.
So I had 2 items. So I attended the Clayton Community Library Foundation board meeting on behalf of the council on Wednesday, May 16th. And then we had the budget subcommittee meeting on Friday, May 18th, and that's also on today's agenda. So we'll cover that a little bit later.
Okay.
That's it.
Vice Mayor Shuey.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Diaz.
Thank you. On the 18th, I attended as the county representative and the city of Clayton, the East Bay Regional Communications System Authority meeting in Dublin, and that's a group of city representatives and county representatives that develop and enhance the communications, emergency communications between all of our emergency service providers, police, fire, and others that are involved in the first response arena. We continue to develop that and reutilize many of the frequencies that were once used as cellular and no longer have been abandoned as those services have improved, and the county has recaptured those frequencies so we can make sure that there's good communications between the two entities within the two counties, Alameda and Contra Costa. Continue to attend the various meetings with the Clayton 8th Annual Barbecue. Attended on the 28th. Well, first of all, on the 26th, we had the concerts in the Grove. Big Band Beat was out there. We had a good number of people come out, even though that was a holiday weekend, and had a good evening. It wasn't too hot, but very pleasant out there, and had a good crowd. On Monday the 28th, we had the Memorial Day ceremony, which I represented the members of the council that were there, and that just about does it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. I also attended a number of meetings. The first one was on the 18th with Councilmember Catalano, the Budget Subcommittee, where we did meet with the Finance Manager, Kevin Mazzuto, and the City Manager to go over the budget that will be presented later this evening. On the 26th, also attended the concert in the Grove, and the crowd was a little lighter than normal, not only because it was warmer, but because it was a Warriors playoff night. So we still had a good turnout, and the Warriors won, so double good night for that. On the 28th, I attended the VFW Memorial Day observation downtown and actually presented the mayor's message to the crowd in honor of our fallen heroes from Contra Costa County since 9/11. That was the particular focus at this year's ceremony. And we had a very moving speech by a Pearl Harbor survivor that talked about his certainly strong service to the country and honoring his fallen friends, and then gave it a very vivid recount of his memories of that day. So that really was very interesting for the entire crowd to be taken back and just reminded on what we've lost on our fallen heroes who have been protecting our nation throughout the years. Next up then on Sunday, this past Sunday, I attended a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout Court of Honor for Logan Scothstall, who achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and finished his Scout project. And in recognition of that, then, he did have a big presentation here in Hoyer Hall. We actually gave him a proclamation and deemed that day, Sunday the 3rd, as Logan Scothstall Day here in Clayton in recognition of his advancement all the way up to Eagle Scout, which is quite a remarkable achievement. And in his particular case, it was recognized by the acceptance of appointments to both the Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy, which was quite remarkable that he received both, and he decided to go to Annapolis with the Naval Academy. Then yesterday I attended the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy meeting on behalf of Clayton, and of interest to Clayton on the agenda was an item dealing with the Phillips 66 work that they're doing in reviewing all of the potential damage to gas lines. And we wanted to make sure that they're mitigating any damage whatsoever done, and also keeping all of the work off of Marsh Creek Road so that they don't further congest that busy thoroughfare. So that's the types of meetings that have kept me busy. And then moving on to what I think brought most of you here tonight, and that's the public comment portion. And because a number of you might not be that familiar with how we conduct public comment, I wanted to go over kind of the guidelines so that we can be efficient and give everyone an opportunity to be heard that wants to be heard. We have a number of speaker cards, but that's not the only requirement. If you do want to speak, ask you to come forward as well and fill out a speaker card when you're done. The guidelines really, public comment is where we allow the members of the public to come and address the council for non-agenda items. Now, most of our agenda items are public hearings, and they have an opportunity for public discussion when those come up on the agenda. But there are occasions when the citizens want to address the council with issues they feel are important and that we should address. And that's what brought most of you here this evening. We would appreciate it if, when you do come to the mic, to identify yourself and to fill out a speaker card, and that's so that we correctly spell your name for the record. Also, address your comments to the city council. That's what the intent is of this section, not to city staff. And it's not really a question and answer session. It's more for you to express your concerns or issues, and then it's up to the city council and staff to take action if it's warranted at a later date. Now, if we do have a large number of speakers that are focused on a common issue, I might ask for a speaker representing the crowd, and then certainly allowing anyone that wants to get up to add to that as well, so that we can take efficient use of our time and your time as well. If you do wish to get up and speak and want to support something that's already been said, for instance, by a previous speaker, you can just indicate that you agree with them and then raise any new issues that you want the council to be aware of. This is a public meeting, so we certainly want to respect everyone's right to get up and address the council, treat them with respect, and hold any applause or reaction from the crowd. This is not really a public forum for that. This is more to allow you to address the council. And you'll see that we do have a 3-minute maximum so that we can get through everyone's ability to speak tonight. You see a timer up here on the podium here, or on the next to me, and you'll see that it starts with a 3-minute allotment when the speaker starts. A yellow light will flash when you have 30 seconds, and the red light when time is up at the 3 minutes, and ask you to respect that so we can allow everyone that wants to speak to get up tonight. So, understanding that then, I do want to get to our speaker cards. First up, I'm going to go ahead and ask Ann Stanaway to get up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Ann Stanaway. I'm at 1553 Haviland Place in Clayton, and the council knows me well. So, in the continuing saga, on May 17, 2018, I was stunned to hear our current mayor represent to a neighborhood public forum that Clayton's enforcement of public safety ordinances is entirely discretionary, and intimate that the city actually believes the public safety is well served by arbitrary prosecution. Furthermore, he went on to promise his audience that he would seek official permanent variance from ordinances like the California Fire Code, fire lane protocols and specifications for the convenience of specific members of his own neighborhood. With this pronouncement, our mayor has put the city at risk for a class action lawsuit. Now, the public record reflects a clear pattern of intent. Both this mayor and our current vice mayor openly mock state public safety regulations, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the federal playground equipment safety regulations. Any rookie litigator could win monumental damages based on Clayton's history eschewing protection of the residents' welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Danaway. Next up is the first card. Now, this one does indicate it's the downtown project that is the issue that they would like to address, and I suspect most of you are here for that reason. Is there one spokesperson that would like to get up and capture the desires of most of the crowd, and then certainly allow anyone else to speak after that?
I have a brief intro.
Certainly.
If that's okay.
Certainly.
I have a second topic too. Should I do that later, or?
You can do both.
Okay. All right. I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but mine's short on the topic you just brought up. Short, okay. Maybe not so sweet. Okay. I'm kidding. We did not bring tar and feather like you mentioned for some of those that missed that at the beginning. So good evening, City Council members. I'd like to touch on two topics.
Excuse me, your name, please?
Joanna Welch.
Thank you.
JoannaWelch, like the grape jelly. I say that a lot. So I'll mention the other topic first that you said I should mention first. First topic is the camera system installed in Clayton. I stood before the City Council a while back and mentioned the increase in mail thefts and the successful use of cameras in other cities to help address those types of crimes. I asked the council to please consider the expenditure and contact other cities to learn more about their successful implementation and use. Council members at that time said they had not heard of anything like that, and my request for consideration was not well received by the council, basically dismissed. Needless to say, I was thrilled to learn the camera purchase almost 2 years later after reading about it in the Clayton Pioneer. However, unfortunately, while recently reporting ongoing mail thefts in our neighborhood, I learned some disturbing news from the Clayton police. The officers told me that the former police chief was in such a rush to install the camera system before he left office that due diligence was not performed. The camera system designed to capture images of license plates has such poor quality the police can barely make out the images of the vehicles and cannot read license plates. They said the cameras need constant cleaning with no one to clean them and thus are not performing the service to the community that they were intended to. They said a new system will likely be proposed, but it will need to be approved by the council and others, and that takes time. Until then, this important tool in addressing crime is basically useless. Before the city spends more money after bad, I request that inquiries are made with other cities regarding their effective camera systems. It's bad enough Clayton taxpayers will likely have to spend more money for another camera system, but we certainly don't want to spend it again on a third. Second topic is the proposed downtown facility. I am opposed to the building of the massive facility in the heart of Clayton, and I am not alone in my opposition. I ask that you let residents know why this parcel of land must be developed, what would happen if we didn't develop on this site, how would no development negatively impact residents, would taxes go up, if so, how much? We need to know specifics so we better understand the situation. Residents have a lot of questions about this proposed development. I'm asking you, the City Council, to schedule an interactive forum with residents in the next 30 days to have an open dialogue and discuss our concerns. If you truly want to know how residents feel about this development, formally, where they stand, then put it to a vote. Please understand, we want to work together with the City Council to ensure that any development in Clayton is in the best interests of the entire community. Day Ford of Fulcrum Development was quoted in the May 11th edition of the Clayton Pioneer as saying, quote, "We won't go forward with the project without community support." I hope that's true. I hope that you too won't allow it to go forward without support from the community you serve. Thank you.
Okay, one thing I do want to add to the public comment section is the council, because this is a non-agenda item, the community has not been advised that the issue will be addressed and discussed. So the council is prohibited for taking action on any of these items. The council can look into that, and if they want to take action, we certainly will. And that'll be public noticed, and you'll be
What are you talking about, the cameras? Or
any issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're unable to take action on issues raised during public comment section. Those under public hearing section, certainly we can. So I just wanted to set the stage for expectations on how much we can accomplish.
Public safety, but I got
Okay. So talking about the downtown development, I thought it might be helpful if I just provided a status of that to correct some misunderstanding of where we are in that process. And wanted to let you know that it's certainly the council's intent that we provide a large forum for public input. The possible developer here, Fulcrum, is in the concept stage. Nothing, no formal presentation has been made to the city as of yet. They're still developing their plan that has not been submitted formally to the Community Development Department. They did submit a draft plan quite some time ago, and the staff did advise them that they felt it was a good idea for Fulcrum to schedule community meetings so that they can get a sense of what issues might be raised if they do move forward on that proposal. Those 2 meetings have been held. That was the one that was held last week. Those meetings are held by the developer, not the city. And this is again at the developer's expense to get a sense of what concerns will the city have, the city citizens, that they should prepare for both as they develop their plan and then as they move forward before the city.
The paper says they are purchasing it. It's important to read what's been printed.
If you'll let me finish, we're just talking about what plans they have for the development of that property if they decide to move forward on their plan. Back in November of 2017, we did strongly recommend that they hold these community meetings, and that's why they were held recently. If they do submit a formal application, it will be reviewed by the Community Development Department, the Planning Commission, and the City Council. And there will be noticed public hearings at the Planning Commission and City Council levels where they do certainly anticipate the public's input to be provided at that time, and you're encouraged, much as you want to do tonight, to provide your input on how you want the city to react to the plan that's been submitted. But right now, we still don't have a formal plan that we can review. When those plans are submitted, you'll be notified. The first step will be a very long review by our Community Development Director and Department. And just to give you a sense of how long it takes, and because that would be a major development that's being proposed, it would take between 10 and 12 months if that plan was presented today before the Community Development Department was in a position to move that plan forward for the Planning Commission to begin its review. So this is a very long, thorough process that the city goes through to look at the zoning and the impacts that that proposal would have on our city. The public will have ample opportunity to provide input at those public hearings. So you'll certainly have that opportunity, but it's going to be a little further down the road after a formal plan has been submitted. So the City Council certainly has taken no position. In fact, we're prohibited from participating in those proposals and those town meetings. So that's why you didn't see planning commissioners or city council members at those meetings, and we are not allowed to take a position, and we don't want to take a position because we don't know what those plans are. We are required to keep an open mind so that we don't show bias that could be challenged if and when that plan is ever formally submitted to the city. We want to remain as an open mind based on that final plan, and that final plan will take into consideration your input at those various stages. So, excuse me, she is our Planning Development Director, Community Development Director, so she heads that department. So the developer realizes this is a risk that they're taking when they propose a plan like this. There's no guarantee that it's going to be approved. They have to make sure that they've met all of the demands of our planning department, as well as adhering to all of the zoning regulations, or if changes have to be made, they'll have to go through that process to request changes to be made. So at the current time, it's still at the concept stage, and that's what was shared with you. That's not the plan. Well, we don't think that's the plan that will ultimately be proposed, but we don't know. That was just the concept stage. So we wait until the actual formal plan is submitted to the city. And up until then, you won't see involvement then from the Planning Commission or the City Council. So I just wanted to explain that. That is the current status of the project.
So council members should not tell neighbors to keep their mouths closed on this issue in opposition, correct?
That's certainly not advice I would give anyone asking me. That's all I can say. We want to encourage public input, and that public input will come at the public hearings that are scheduled once a formal plan, if a formal plan, is ultimately submitted to the Community Development Department for review. So at that time, you'll be able to see exactly what's being proposed and whether or not it meets our view of what Clayton should look like going into the future.
Mayor, may I add? I don't want to belabor it. I want to let you ladies and gentlemen, to get your speeches. But on the back is a 2-page fact sheet that I think, if everybody reads it, is going to help clear up some of the misconceptions. Everybody here on the council is aware of next door. We see the good, the bad, and the ugly on that. We're aware of that. Let's be clear on a couple of things. This downtown parcel has been vacant for decades. The discussion about what to do with this downtown parcel has been going on for decades. I've been on the council for going on 16 years. It has always been discussed every time during each term. We have solicited public input time after time. Publics come and go. You move in and out of the neighborhoods. We have always looked at that. The current zoning regulations are for all retail down there. This plan does not entail all retail. And so in order for it to go forward, there would have to be a determination and a change to our zoning. What is occurring now is exactly what is supposed to happen, okay? Hopefully in a reasonable, rational, respectful manner. We wanted to hear from you, and part of the council's questions of our own before any of this went forward was, we're going to get public input on this. We're going to be able to hear from the public as to what they want. Because, believe it or not, most of our meetings are attended by 0 people, okay? We try and get the word out. It sometimes doesn't happen until this. But none of us up here have made up our minds one way or the other. In fact, we've made it very clear we want to hear what the constituents, you guys, have to say. So we haven't made up our minds one way or the other. Why do I keep saying girls? I coach girls softball, so I think I've got that on the brain. You have the opportunity to speak now. You're going to have the opportunity to speak for quite a few other opportunities, because as the mayor said, this is going to go on potentially for quite a long time. Although they may not even submit anything, in which case it dies and then we go back to square one. But I've seen the stuff on Nextdoor. Treat us with respect because we're your neighbors. Do you think that we really have any strong desire to go out there and do something that is going to hurt our own children or our own neighbors? We're all out there representing you. We've been doing it for a long time, and we're here to hear what you have to say. Please say it respectfully. We'll give you the respect. And this is exactly what we wanted when we set this process forward. Okay? So we want to hear from you.
Any other comments?
Do we have an interactive forum since this isn't the right one?
to come to the microphone.
Excuse me. I indicated this is your opportunity to address your concerns with the council. You'll have ample opportunity to question the plan once one is submitted. So that's the appropriate time, rather than, we understand many of the people that attended those presentations did not like or support the proposal that was shared with the community. Again, I want to remind you, that was a conceptual picture of what the developer was planning at this time. I suspect based on that community input, that might be revised a bit. But we haven't seen that final plan. And that's what we need to wait and react to, because that's really going to be what we're dealing with as far as, do we have to make changes to zoning, to our downtown specific plan? Because we spent a lot of time with our community and community groups coming up with a plan for the future development of Clayton. So we want that plan implemented unless we feel times have changed, at which time we would have to go through a process to change that plan. But right now, any developer is going to have to abide by the downtown zoning and the plan. So that's what the developers should be looking at.
Oh, and one other thing, Gary, do you have a response on the cameras? My understanding is our cameras are working
Mr.
great.
Vice Mayor, I don't. I'm actually surprised by that comment. I'm not particularly encouraged by it either, and I'll be talking about it in the staff meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly the type of stuff that we need to know. My understanding is that our cameras are working well. We get reports from our current and former police chiefs every week about items that happen, and oftentimes those cameras have come into play in helping our police do their jobs. So obviously staff will look at it, and we'll let you know, but that's the first I've heard of it, because I think it's going, I've heard it's going well.
Yeah,
So,
there have been incidents, there have been incidents of, that we've reported to the city council of license plates that have been read. So I don't know if it's a recent event or whatever, but we'll find out tomorrow in my staff meeting.
Cool.
That was in the beginning when they were clean, just so you know. And these were 2 officers.
Well,
Okay.
but that's the type of input we appreciate receiving from the public. If you want to raise that issue, it's something that we'll follow up and investigate ourselves. And if we have to take action, we will.
Thank you.
So thank you. Okay, so first up then, and everyone will get an opportunity. I see that you have a speaker card as well. So the next one I pull up is Jay Gamble. You'd like to come and address the council?
Live on Prospector Place. I'm glad that Councilman Shuey spoke about the respect part, because I didn't get much when I was talking to Mr. Reyes at their information meeting. In addition to these cabinets were not allowed to be open and chairs be brought out for some of the elderly people. No chairs is what people were told. So you can look into that when you have time.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm the one that put up the poll and the petition on Nextdoor and also on change.org. It's as clean as I'm assuming it can be. I posted it on a Clayton neighborhood site, and it does have some overlapping Concord neighborhoods, which I still think you should be concerned about, since those people are, if they're motivated to vote in the poll or on the petition, they're obviously coming down to downtown Clayton like I did for 8 years before I moved here in 2004. It's got as of 2 hours ago, 87% against any type of development of a big box store down there. Or building. This isn't about old people. It's about the right fit for Clayton, and it definitely is not the right fit for Clayton. I got 1,500 on the petition in a little over a week. The thing looks like a strip mall, if you want my opinion, just my frank opinion on the whole thing. And like I said, I think that the council and people in Clayton should be concerned that having such a building there is kind of a danger to the residents as well, because during festivals and car shows, et cetera, downtown, even if we're going to be able to have those type of things in that end of town anymore, I was here, Mr. Del Caro was a little agitated because he didn't like my idea of him putting a Ferris wheel on Main Street down by the park. And I'm sure that the Tilt-A-Whirl and some of the other stuff is not going to fit on Main Street where he had it located on his schematic. Like I said, you're going to hear from a lot of other people, but eventually, if the right thing isn't done, we're going to take this and we're going to take it to a real petition, and we're going to be putting it on a ballot. So if we need to call a special election, or if this needs to go on November ballot, we will do that. There's too many good memories left in that lot, and to look at some building that goes all the way down to KinderCare parking lot is going to break my heart, driving down the street and not being able to see the scenery or the mountain or the downtown especially. So again, it's not about old people, it's about what's right for all of Claytonians.
Okay. And again, I want to encourage all of you to keep your eye out for any information about a final plan being submitted. And that's when we really need your input to look at exactly what is being requested for our downtown area, and get your input on how you feel that fits into Clayton's future. So that's the time to really provide that input. Next up then is Fran Gavidia? Frank, excuse me.
My name is Frank Gavidia. I live at 104 Gold Rush Court. Completely agree with Jim. I was going to come up here and speak about one thing, but after listening to Dave, I think you guys, right now, we don't trust you. You're politicians, so therefore, okay? A lot of bad things or a lot of information has come out of this. I have incredible concerns about the fact that our city manager cannot answer the question about the cameras and is paid $300,000 a year. That's outrageous for this little town. Okay? Between him and Mindy Gentry, nearly $500,000 of our tax dollars are spent on 2 salaries. These are the folks that bring us these projects. We don't trust you. That's why Mr. Gamble talks about bringing things to the ballot. We don't want to go down that route. I don't believe any of you were on the council in '02. Correct me if I'm wrong. Were you, sir? I know she was. So I remember a gas station that was going to end up in front of my house. We were here with pitchforks and torches. That went to the ballot. City council wanted that. So we do not trust you, because while you say you have not made up your minds, real estate development lawyer, she's for just about anything. I'm not familiar with your firm, but I'll find out. Okay? You guys, you say things, you haven't made up your mind, but the interests are there. Okay? So we don't trust you. You want us to trust you, you got to give us reasons to trust you. Make sure this guy can answer questions about what goes on in the city for what he gets paid. That's all I have to say.
Next up is John Challoner. Challoner.
Mayor Hayden, members of the City Council. My name is John Challoner, and I've been in Clayton since the mid-70s, and we've raised our children here, and they're our grandchildren. I'm a member of the Clayton Business and Community Association and was a member of the CBPA back in the 70s. We have been enjoying our life here, albeit not in a perfect world, but darn close to it. Mary and I were involved in establishing the Clayton Roundup at the Horseman's up on Mount Diablo, and later down at the 7-Up bottling plant. I still have the recipe for cowboy beans for 300. I was also on the committee for our first golf tournament, the Clayton Classic, and have the original hat and umbrella that we gave away at the door. It took a lot of work to get both projects off the ground. My political resources pretty much tapped out by my position as Senior Vice President of the Sino Companies. I never became immersed here, as it was my chill-out time and my private refuge at home. However, I continue to serve the county, working with Warren Roop as a member of the Contra Costa Sheriff's Executive Board, while raising substantial monies for charities throughout the county. The city finds itself in a conflict over a project that is in the concept stage, and at this point in time has not formally been submitted to the city for consideration. However, it has brought to the surface an underlying fact of life here in Clayton that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. If it is the desire of the constituency, for example, to leave the downtown as it is, a great place for festivals, music, and food for about 10 days a year, and our city council shares that goal of maintaining our city's desirability factor, but it also has an important responsibility to discharge its fiduciary obligations to its constituency. For example, having to produce an economic benefit to offset the costs generated by a combination of costs to maintain as well as the value of our revenue producing assets. To the board of directors, the city council, who have obligations to all of the stakeholders, the residents, it becomes imperative to undertake a fact-finding process to quantify just what makes up the universe of information necessary to make a prudent decision for the city as a whole. Once known, if a majority of the stakeholders wish to assume the costs of doing nothing, the city can adjust the tax base to accommodate their wishes. However, if through the planning process there is a more prudent path to take, to consider, not only it takes into consideration the preferred desire of use as a public amenity, and at the same time having ability to offset the costs of doing so, it becomes an alternative path for consideration. An outline on how to structure the planning process cannot be approached in a haphazard fashion, The first thing that needs to be addressed is the financial cost to carry to the city by doing nothing. Once that has been established, you have a base to consider the impact of doing nothing or considering an alternative use. In that vein, I would suggest that stage 2 be a committee chaired by maybe the city manager to include citizen input as well as financial, legal, real estate marketing, and other expertise as needed. The time has come for everyone to take a deep breath and step back. Hopefully, we all have the same goals. First and foremost, maintaining the ambience of a small town atmosphere while being good stewards of our city's assets and finances. Thank you.
Next speaker card I have is for Brian Bunnell.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak. When I last spoke before this council back in May 16th of last year, you were discussing a zoning variance that was later approved, and one of the prime concerns that was brought up was this possible project downtown. At that time, Commissioner or Vice Mayor Shuey, with a smirk, dismissed those concerns as hyperbole and unwarranted concerns. Yes, that smirk. Turns out it wasn't hyperbole.
Please speak into the mic so we can catch up.
I don't think anybody's having a problem hearing me.
Well, but this is being televised and taped. Yeah.
Turns out that wasn't hyperbole, and it certainly wasn't an unwarranted concern. What this shows is not a problem just with that project, but a problem with the council communicating information. Because Fulcrum Development has widely publicized that they are in an exclusive purchasing agreement with the city for that land, which was apparently entered into on or about November of last year, not 6 months after the hyperbole and unwarranted concern was dismissed by this council. What I submit to this council is your job as council members is to serve the people. We don't serve you. We shouldn't have to keep an ear out or an eye out for a development that affects this entire community, the character of this community, and how this community works. It is your job. It is your job to put that in front of us. This isn't a matter of putting up a stop sign. This is changing the entire character of this city, and that is something that should be broadcast far and wide, long before you enter into an exclusive purchasing agreement with some real estate developer who has gilded intentions poised under the helping seniors, but is really only looking for a profit. The distrust that was mentioned earlier is a big problem, and it's been created by this council. It's been created by the city manager through the smoke screen and the information that's been thrown out. And again, let's assume that's all true. Isn't that a problem in and of itself? If there's confusion, whose fault is it? Is it their fault? No, it's your fault. Your job is not to just vote on things. Your job is to keep us apprised of what is going on in this city, how it affects our lives, how it affects our families, and how it affects this city. It's not our job to find it out.
Next up is Fidna Hughes.
Good evening. I'm Fiona Hughes, Fiona, and I was planning on talking about one thing and then realized, having heard so many speakers tonight, that there is a huge divide, and you've heard words like distrust. And it really comes down to lack of communication between what we're hearing and what we hear in sessions with the developer. You mentioned, Mr. Hayden, that in fact none of you were present at those meetings. It was simply so that we could hear directly from the developer. And so contrary to your comments about 10 to 12 months for the planning to be approved and realized, They were, in fact, that evening telling us that they hope to break ground in Q1 of 2019. Something doesn't jive with the calendar on that. So whereas they're making it sound like this development is a fait accompli, that they are just going to decide, I think you even said, whether they decide to move forward, I would hope it's not their decision as to whether this moves forward, and that as we, the community, will be letting you know how we feel about it, since we're the shareholders of this property, that you will then be taking that voice out and deciding what's best for our community with citizens' input. So the disconnect is something that I think we need to start addressing here. It's where we're hearing something, going on the website for Fulcrum and finding out that this is happening and this is underway and that this has been agreed, and hearing from you that we're still in the concept stage. So clearly there is some communication problem that has a huge disconnect. I want to go on to make the point too that I personally oppose the proposed development. I don't want to get drawn in, and I would urge everybody here not to get sidetracked by thinking of, you know, what kind of tangents and what we should build in that spot. But I think the overwhelming opposition says just do nothing. Say no, don't build on it. You can't put a price on children jumping from hay bale to hay bale while the Oktoberfest is on, and the atmosphere and the hot August nights and all the very many things that we enjoy around Clayton, which would be basically done away with if something of that magnitude, the 70,000 square foot, 3-story structure is placed in its spot. So even though realtors are telling us, well, we could have a carousel parked right here, right next to the Children's World parking lot, it's like, I'm sorry, you're trying to force fit this and squish it into an area. It's going to spoil forever the downtown that we know and love. So I'd urge you to really consider communicating proactively to your constituents, since we're the ones that need to provide input. Thank you.
All right, next up is Dee Vieira.
Good evening, members of the council. Thank you for all you do. My name is Dee Vieira, and I moved to Clayton 7 years ago. For the record, I do not work and have never worked for developers, any city government, or any assisted living centers anywhere. I am here as a lone wolf here to express my support for the potential Grand Oaks Assisted Living and Memory Care Center with retail downtown. I know that no decisions to build this project are on the table yet. I understand the current drawings of the proposed building are being rethought to complement the environment. This project that will house 35 memory care seniors and 60 assisted seniors will not take away our community events and have few, if any, impacts to our community downtown, in my opinion. It has been more than 7 years since the last proposal got shot down, and other proposals as well, for valid concerns over parking, traffic, and other concerns relating to outside events. I have recently read alternative ideas for the vacant lot put out there by longtime residents, Clayton residents. I would not object to any of these ideas, but I have to wonder why these ideas never came to fruition. It's been at least 7 years, and that's a long time to put together an alternative idea for that vacant lot. So now we have a potential project that has few, if any, impacts that initially concerned our community in the past. But there is still an objection because it is felt that the downtown location is wrong and it wouldn't benefit everyone. I have researched other communities where these assisted living spaces with memory care paired with and without retail are built downtown, all close to life, all with their noises. There are many, but to name a couple, Merrill Gardens in downtown Lafayette, the Carlton in downtown Pleasant Hill. So my point is, the concept is not new, that these living spaces are being built downtown. Downtown location is where life is. These are our parents and grandparents. We wouldn't be here without them. Why can't they live in Clayton within walking distance to life downtown? Why can't they live out their lives where families gather at parks and community events? These are people nearing the ends of their lives. I think they would welcome happy noises and being near life. Why would anyone suggest moving them to Morgan territory far away from life? I think we owe our aging community a lot more respect than that. I think we can all agree people are living longer and need supported living spaces where they feel safe and have a peace of mind. As far as losing charm downtown if Grand Oaks comes, I would disagree. It isn't the building or the size that brings charm. It's what resides in the building that brings charm. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Christina Nadler.
Hello, City Council. This is my first time attending a meeting, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. Can you guys hear me? Am I okay? Okay. Louder. All right. City Council, you are members of this community. As residents of Clayton, you know how important downtown is to us, Main Street in particular. It's very important to our way of life. It's what makes our town special. It's the reason many of us live here. It's why we choose the longer commute. It's why we buy homes here. Part of the panic you are seeing on social media and in this room is because many of us can't believe that a project like this would even be considered for the Main Street location. Despite being early in the process, for many of us, this project is still too close to fruition for comfort. I think this is why people are panicking and questioning the motivation for pushing to develop this parcel. I think we can remedy that by being a little bit more open in our communication and separating discussions around this parcel of land from the development that's being proposed. If we can come together as a community and have discussions about why we have to develop this area outside of waiting for this development group to submit their proposal, then I think people would be able to separate the motivation, or questioning the motivation of why the City Council isn't facilitating these discussions. So I am requesting formally that we set up some sort of dialogue, some sort of interactive Q&A session within the next 30 days to start addressing these questions. I realize that City Council is not able to speak about the proposed fulcrum development, but I think there are many other questions and problems that we can solve outside of that if we can come together and have a discussion. And I think this community really wants that. We really want to have that dialogue with you. It's great to have the opportunity to stand up here and speak our minds and have you hear us, but I think we need to go a step further and actually hear what you have to say about our questions. Thank you very much.
Next up will be Sandra Adams.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I agree with Christina, who was just up before me here. I think it's important that we should have good communication. I feel that we have not gotten all the facts. I also want to say that I've been a resident 33 years here in Clayton, and it's been beautiful. It's been a wonderful life for me for the last 33 years. I came from West Los Angeles with my husband, so you can imagine the difference that I've experienced, seeing cows actually walking around on the hills. I couldn't believe it. I would stare for a long time at that. So I'm really pleased to be part of Clayton. And I'm also, I'm going to compliment the City Council. For the 33 years, you have made some very good decisions. Now, the idea of that gas station, that was a bummer, okay? But the other ones, you know, the concerts in the Grove, the Endeavor Hall, DiMartini Winery as our city hall, these were exceptional ideas, exceptional. This is an exceptional town, very different than Los Angeles for me. And I am so honored to be here. Now, as far as what I heard from the developer when I came to that meeting, now I spoke to Mr. Reyes, and I introduced myself. I said, I'm a registered nurse, and are you going to have registered nurses on staff? He says, no, this is only a care home. We're not going to have any medical staff whatsoever. And I had heard that there was going to be nursing staff, so that was different. And then I said, a lot of people are against this project in the community. And he said to me, he says, well, I really don't care if you and this other lady are against this project, because there'll be another person that'll be for the project. So he really wasn't open in listening to what I had to say. I was a little shocked. He seemed like a friendly enough guy, but I was shocked that he was not interested in what I had to say. I thought this was going to be an interactive interaction. I thought this was going to be something that I could come away with some information. I didn't feel that way with that program of this developer. I just want to say I'm against this project. I'm for communication with the public, but I'm against this project because that home care is going to be enormous. It's 91 beds, and that means that's much bigger than any care home that is usual in the state of California. Most are from 6 to 15 beds, according to a website I was on. And this is going to take up so much land, 70,000 square feet, from Oak Street almost all the way to Marsh Creek Road. That's almost maybe 70-80% of Main Street. We only have 2 streets. We have Main Street and we have Center Street. That's a lot. That's taking up the town. That's taking up the town. I don't hate my city council. You guys are listening to me. I'm grateful that you're listening to me. You've done such terrific stuff in the past. Please don't make a mistake on this one. Please don't. I know you're not ready. It's a concept phase. I didn't understand that. Okay. But let's have give and take. Please let us in on these decisions too. We live here. We love it. We want to love you too.
Okay, we've just got 2 more to go, folks. The next one up is Colleen. Is it Samsung?
Hello. Colleen Samsung. I live at 1279 Shell Circle. A little nervous. I'm not big on public speaking, so it takes a lot for me to get up in front of all these people.
Doing fine.
I feel very strongly opposed to this project, and I agree with all of the other people that have spoken opposing it that came before me, that there's been a lot of lack of communication, and it doesn't inspire trust and confidence in your city council when you're not invited to speak before something like this happens. Why not enter that dialogue earlier and invite us to hear what we want, hear what our needs are, hear what our concerns are, what our hopes are for this community, and then maybe start looking for a developer. It seems like things flip-flopped, and it was backward. And I came to that meeting with the developer, and it seemed like they were a marketing session, and they were trying to work the crowd, and they had a smile on their face when they first came up to you, but as soon as they found out you weren't supporting that project, I felt a hostile reaction, an aggressive reaction, an intimidation. And I didn't appreciate that because, like I said, it takes a lot for me to get up here and speak and to meet someone face to face and try and have a reasonable dialogue. He actually accused me of not liking old people, wanting to ship them off somewhere far, far away. That's going to be further from the truth. I've had a father that died of cancer, a father-in-law that died of brain cancer. I've had a beloved aunt with dementia. not everybody is going to wind up in a facility like this or wants to. Some of us are going to be in homes with our families. Some may wind up there. But you can't, he made it seem like this was the only solution. And if you weren't for it, then you're against old people. And I didn't appreciate that. I'm glad to see there's so many people here. And I hope more people will come forward and speak. And I hope you'll be open to listening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next up is Brian, is it Kiefer?
Right.
Sorry, couldn't read that.
Yeah, poor writing. Okay. I'm kind of shy too, so you guys have to excuse me if I, get a little funny. Just really briefly, I heard some really good comments here, and I think from my perspective, it seems like this project is already, some sort of finished. I'm surprised that, I guess we've already heard there's like a construction start date already. And I think from my perspective, I think this is probably kind of a marketing gimmick by the developer that they're trying to show that the project's already done, and what can the citizens do about it? It's too late. And I think that a lot of us are here to tell you that...
Speak up to the mic, please.
I'm sorry. I think a lot of us are here to tell you that it's not too late, and I want to make sure my fellow citizens know that. Really briefly, I think the footprint of the projects is too excessive for downtown Clayton. I think someone's eloquently mentioned that it would take up most of downtown, and I'm not sure if that's the vision we have for downtown Clayton, but certainly I do appreciate the city of Clayton's issue, because what the heck does fit in downtown Clayton? And you guys have spent years to do it. Last time I was here, talked to the city council many years ago. I think Ms. Pierce was here then. What was that, 40 years ago, I think? It was a long time ago. And so, and I was objecting to this project you guys put over there on the side street that it has been, I guess it was foreclosed on about a year after it was built. Had a couple owners, never had full occupancy. And so, downtown Clayton is a difficult place to figure out what to put. But I think the footprint is just too excessive. The developer himself, the project designer and developer, they don't really have any experience with this type of project. If they've misled you into thinking they do, they're wrong. Just go on their site and look at what they built before. They're building huge projects on a lot bigger area than we have here. I think, our quest basically is to fill some sort of retail dream out in Clayton downtown here. And I think that's kind of misguided, because what do we really want? Retail down there? What do we want to attract 10,000 people a day? Maybe if it's really booming, 25,000 people a day? Maybe on weekends, 25,000 people a day? Is that really what the citizens of Clayton want? A big retail strip mall outlet? I think not. And, so far we pay for it. We pay for that in our tax add-ons and stuff like that. I don't think our poor Clayton Station up there really hasn't panned out all that well for us. We pay a lot in police services and extra services to make that thing run. You get some revenue from it, that's true. But I'm afraid if we just go full retail downtown, we'd have the same problems. And our net would be not what we think it is. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I have one more speaker that's requested to speak to the council, Bill Jordan.
Thank you, Council. My name is Bill Jordan, and I don't have a position on the development downtown yet. I'm not taking a side in either way, but I do want to say that for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been following that project downtown on that lot. There was Pacific Union Land Company. They were looking at doing the same project. And those meetings were all on the agenda. They were all, properly noticed. I went to a lot of them, and even with Fulcrum. So, when people talk about miscommunication and, covert dealings and so forth, I have to disagree, because if they have a computer at home, they could look at the staff report, they could hear the real estate broker give his presentation on the status of, how many calls and, and the renewal of his listing for more marketing and so forth, and where it's been at. But this project downtown, it's not anything new. It's been publicly addressed properly, I think, in my opinion. If you look for Pacific Union Land Company in 2017, you'll see it. So this is just another developer looking to do the same thing that he was going to do. And I believe there was another developer before that, but everything in my opinion has been all upfront and done correctly. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to address the council during this session? One more.
Hello, my name is Marcy Longchamps. I reside at 3001 Coyote Circle in Clayton, and I just want to say that I am opposed to the proposed development at this time at that particular location. And I am requesting and advocating that nothing be done at this time, that we have a chance to communicate with you. And I am requesting formally requesting that we have an interactive forum with the council together, speaking kindly and respectfully to one another. I'm requesting it within the next 30 days. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else coming forward, I do want to point out just a couple of things. The comments that we should take into consideration the concerns of the residents here in Clayton for how the downtown area develops. There is a downtown or town-specific plan for our center area in the downtown area called the Town Center Specific Plan that was developed, I think it was about 15 years ago, with public meetings, with citizens, with representatives from different groups, and that was at that time our vision of what Clayton should look like into the future. It was our dream plan, and that's what developers were asked to look at, and that's what they have been looking at as other plans have been proposed. But I want to remind you again, you've heard tonight, this is at the concept stage. I think the developer is still trying to fine-tune what this plan will be if and when they want to submit it to Clayton. And then we'll all have an opportunity to really look at it and provide input at that time. So any other comments, Tuya?
I want to make a couple other comments. I want to first of all thank everybody for coming here and speaking, but I want to make a couple just very procedural comments, some of it which have already been discussed. But, so based on sort of my own experience, one of the most common complaints that citizens have is that they learned about some project way too late in the process, that they learned what their neighbor's doing 2 weeks before the hearing or before something's going to be decided. And that sort of has been mentioned, that's sort of the opposite of where we are today. We don't have an application on file yet. We haven't done environmental review. There have not been any public hearings yet. So we are definitely at the very early stage. And at a stage where the potential developer reached out to the community for feedback from them. In terms of this property itself, as Shui mentioned, there have been a couple public hearings including back in 2015, where the council talked a little bit about what would be the appropriate types of uses on this land. The only decision that this council has made on the current proposal was the exclusive negotiation agreement in November, and that decision was made at a noticed public hearing. So the ENA document is a publicly available document that anybody can access from the website. And I want to make a couple clarifications on that. The ENA is not an approval of any project. I'm going to read from an actual excerpt from that agreement just because I want to be clear on that aspect. The ENA says, quote, "This agreement does not constitute a disposition of the property by the city or exercise of control over the property by the developer. Execution of this agreement by the city is merely an agreement to enter into a period of exclusive negotiations according to the terms hereof, reserving final discussion approval by the city council." So I want to be very clear on that. And then the other point I want to make is that the ENA specifically also called for the developer to reach out to the community and to reach out to them early so that they can get some of their feedback. And there's another section in there that specifically calls that During the pre-application period, the developer shall hold a minimum of 2 advertised community meetings using a city-provided facility for the purpose of sharing and discussing its proposed project with members of the public and interested shareholders. So that is exactly the type of process that I think the city wanted to make sure that the developer does reach out to the community and hear from them. I guess the other point is I want to make is, so in a project of this scope, I mean, obviously we've already talked about you have to have an application. The application has to be reviewed by the city staff. There are comments from city staff. Under CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, every project that requires a discretionary approval also requires that it go through environmental review. Since we don't have an application yet, we haven't gone through any environmental review, so there are no findings whatsoever in that regard yet. And then every project obviously also has to be approved by the city. In this case, a project of this scope would have to be approved, would get recommended by the Planning Commission, then ultimately approved by the City Council. But the key important point is that before a City Council can say a yes or no on any particular project, you know, it's also extremely rare that the project that gets proposed in the early stages is the same project that gets approved at the very end. There's lots of feedback, those environmental findings, and everything else that goes into that processing that changes project. This isn't the best analogy, but given that we're sort of in the graduation period in schools, you know, if you think about a kid who starts a 9th grade in high school, you know, by the time they graduate from high school, not only are they a little bit older, but they've evolved over time. They've heard feedback from their teachers, they've taken classes and whatnot. So, you know, no kid at a 9th grade stage would decide to skip high school and go directly to college or anywhere else. So that analogy definitely applies to development proposal as well. You would not, you know, when projects are, you know, when you first present the project, it goes through that extensive review period. You get comments from the city staff, you get comments from the public, there are public hearings and so forth, so that those do evolve as well. So I think those are really just a couple clarifications that I wanted to make on record. And, you know, I understand that a lot of people here have concerns about the potential development, and that's entirely appropriate, but I do want to be clear that none of us on the council are able to take any action on anything at this point. We need to have the full record in front of us, and that entire full record means an application, environmental review, the community feedback, and everything else that goes into a development process.
So you're saying at this point we have to go through all of that, then say no?
Exactly.
They have to go
through that, not us.
But we still have to wait for it. We're not saying no to the.
As of this time, we don't have an application from the developer even, and that's been filed.
There's certain requirements they have to meet before they can even submit it for final approval to the Planning Commission and then the City Council. That's what's being explained. So there's a lot of steps the developer has to go through to meet before they can even propose this as a legitimate project that meets all of those requirements.
Are there details about what constitutes a meeting by the developer? And the only reason I ask is you've heard a lot of comments tonight.
Nobody at home can hear.
I know that they feel they check the
Well,
box.
Joanna, we can't hear you.
I am going to allow you
Yeah.
to come forward so people can hear.
This is being
Yeah.
broadcast out to the community.
Sorry.
And we have to be able to hear you.
Yeah, so a couple things, and I totally respect what you just said about, you know, that process. And this kind of gets into the nits. You know, we call it at work box checking, right? Where people are like, I got to do this, I check the box. Kind of like, you know, a minimally viable website. Yeah, you did it. It's not very good, but, you know, you did it. With the case of these meetings with the developer, the first meeting had a forum, you know, not to belabor the chairs in the room, but it was, they presented, they had easels, it was a little more discussion. The second one we came in, Mindy Gentry was there, told us there would be no chairs, said it forcefully. The guys marched in the room from the developer, said no chairs, so that immediately tells you, wow, they don't want you getting comfortable. Then they said it's not going to be Q&A, and I said, well, can't you give the people here the same benefit that you gave those of us that attended in April? Just to be fair, because I didn't want them to have a different experience than we did the first time. And they said no. If people want to get up, they can talk. But it was basically divide and conquer. So I guess to your point, yes, they did 2 meetings, but what constitutes a meeting? Because we didn't all hear the same thing. We didn't hear each other's concerns. We didn't hear what each one of them said to each individual person as a whole. we were just kind of hoping that it would be similar, you know, and the two meetings would be similar in format, and that didn't happen. So I just want you to be aware that even though they said that, yeah, we got the two meetings done, they weren't done similarly. It was a difficult day, that second session. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sorry that didn't go the way you had hoped it would go, but there were two intents for that meeting. One was certainly the city wanted to get the word out on what that concept that the developer was working on is going to look like. And more importantly, probably, is we wanted to make sure the developer heard the concerns that the community where they're proposing that, what type of concerns are they going to have? So what should the developer anticipate, both as they design that project, and then if they want to move forward, what type of issues should they expect at the public hearings? So those two elements, hopefully, were gained out of that. Now, obviously, a lot more public education has to go on. You'll be hearing much more about this project if it's actually submitted to the city. Those details.
Because it's a little curious, they switched the format to the point of being hostile of not letting people sit.
Well, sounds like, well, I can't comment on that, though.
Can I noticed
Yep.
too, it doesn't seem.
You need to.
The other thing I noticed was at that meeting, they didn't seem to know where they were. At least I was speaking with Mr. Reyes, and he said, all we have to do now is get the approval of city council, and we're ready to break land. So it was as if they didn't understand the process completely either.
Why are they advertising on their website that this is a go and it's a project under go?
That's,
2020 opening
yeah.
date.
So somebody's lying. It's either you guys or them.
Yeah, 2020 opening date.
Well, all I can tell you is no formal application has been submitted to the city for us to review. And there's a number of steps they have to go through before they can submit that. So we have seen no final plan. That's all I can say. We're unaware of that. We certainly haven't approved anything because nothing formally has been submitted. So I want to assure you at least of that. Comment?
For those of you who don't know, I have 5 kids, and I attend all the Oktoberfest and all that. The rest of the council, we all go down and enjoy all of those things that everybody else does. So we're not just in a vacuum saying, oh, we need this. Now, as to communication, and yes, sometimes I smirk and I apologize. Sometimes it's frustrating up here because we think that we've done everything we need to communicate out there, and then we get you guys coming in saying you never told us. It's frustrating because we do have things like noticed agendas. And no, we don't phone bank and say, by the way, you might be interested in this. There is some responsibility for you guys to look at that. But we have been doing this, as I said, for decades, okay? Because this original plan was retail back when there were no computers and Amazon and everything else, and that retail plan may not be appropriate right now. We have done over the years a lot of things, and we've sought input from not only the businesses downtown, but from the community. Sometimes we get a full room. Sometimes we get 3 people. But as I tell my kids, perception is reality. The one thing that I've heard, and I think the rest of us up here has heard, is that perhaps we could have done a better job in the process because Fulcrum doesn't represent us, and clearly there was a disconnect between their presentation to you and what we intended. Okay? Okay, so we hear that. It is just, and by the way, I ran because I didn't want the gas station and was elected because I was part of the no gas station. So I understand that process. The process is working right now because you're here and you're very angry about the project and you're putting that out there. The developer is listening and saying, do I want to put a proposal in to the city where I'm going to face this opposition? Okay? They may or may not. We can't decide on anything until they do. So you guys are doing what you're supposed to do. We're listening. but we can't take a position one way or another because we don't know everything there. But I will tell you that Mr. Jordan, who came up and told you, is we have been doing this for years, and very few of you were here when we were discussing it before. But so what? You're here now. We're listening. Okay? I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. And when we did the charter, we did the petitions, and we did all of that. Keep doing that. Okay? Keep doing that, and that's part of the process. The process is working. But as far as and you guys can hate us or love us or distrust us or not, we're doing what we think is right, and we thought that this was the proper process to do it, and I think some of you understand that. As far as communication too, I do want to say, our staff has spent a considerable amount of time. Those of you on Nextdoor, and I know I saw your hand raising, those of you on Nextdoor, if you'll notice, there was a very lengthy email response that was received from a citizen that emailed Gary Napper. That basically forms the basis of this fact sheet that everybody should have or take before they go. Gary spent considerable amount of time during his day responding to that. You will find... Well, that's fine. And you and I can have a discussion about other counties and other towns and all of that, because I'm comfortable with that.
Stay focused here, folks.
But what I want to say is, if you communicate with staff in a nice, professional, courteous manner, they will respond to you. And those on the council, if you ask us, we will respond to you. We may tell you, I'm sorry, I can't comment now, because the law says I can't make a decision on that, but we can also forward it. I think I've gotten one email from somebody who basically threatened me. But if you ask questions of us, we will do that. The communication should be two-way, and we hear you.
Can we nip some of this in the bud? Because everyone here, a lot of them, have talked about going to the beginning. Isn't the zoning the beginning of what allows a developer to decide if they are interested? Can we work together with you in a rational, calm, respectful way? Not that we're zoning experts.
We've noted that request.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be looking at that. But I did want to remind folks that there is a town center specific plan that does apply to potential development downtown. So that's a good place to start and to see if that's still appropriate. Excuse me, I have one more speaker. He's had his hand up for quite a while. This public comment has gone quite a long time. We do have other items on our agenda. I invite you, if you don't feel you've been addressed tonight, come back to other meetings. We have a public comment section at all of our city council meetings. But go ahead.
So please excuse me if I'm miseducated on this, but so we're diplomacy, we're democracy. Why don't we just simply have a vote? We have folks that want it, the folks that don't. Let's educate everybody that we're having a vote. Let's give it plenty of time that we're going to have a vote. Have a vote, draw the red line, and end it.
Yeah. Anybody else want to make any comments? One more? More?
No. If you're going to make
the microphone and identify yourself,
Yeah.
so there are people at home that are watching this.
But before you start there, I do want to point out one thing. When you said people can vote whether they want it or not, they don't have the final plan yet. I suspect the plan that's finally, I'm just saying, if that's their final plan, they're taking a risk at coming forward. They were shown that at the last meeting. So go ahead.
So, well, I have two questions actually. Is the property zoned residential?
Can you identify yourself?
Mary Ellen Evenson.
The property is zoned retail.
Retail.
Retail commercial.
And what is the expiration date on the agreement? The exclusive agreement with Fulcrum? Is there an expiration date?
Yes.
There are a number of deadlines in there.
Yep.
He speaks, huh? The exclusive negotiation agreement, and these are target dates that you guys can look on. In fact, it was on the November 17, 2017 City Council meeting, is that they submitted a pre-application, which triggered this process. In their pre-application, our Community Development Department reviewed that preliminary application. We sent them a letter dated May 9th. The agreement says that from that date, the developer has 90 days in which they can file a final application or full application. And so that gives us to about August 9th. That's in the developer's hands, and they're considering it right now. They're hearing all of the comments that I'm forwarding as you folks send them to me. They probably might be on Nextdoor as well. I don't know at that point in time. But at this stage in junction, they are at the full risk in terms of whether they wish to proceed. I know, and I have heard what your reactions have been to the developer meetings. I've also heard their reaction. They weren't very happy. They could have been discouraged, and they may be reconsidering. I know that you would like that, and that's fine. And that's the process that was described and is referred to in the exclusive negotiation agreement. Now, regarding the zoning, it's right now it's a retail commercial zoning, as was indicated. In order for them to put residential on the ground floor, they would require and need to have a general plan amendment as well as a town center specific amendment. I think in this process we discovered things that you folks have as well, that for number one, the plan that was developed many years ago thinking that Clayton might be a second Danville doesn't appear like it's going to happen because the retail marketing and commerce has changed. It's no longer sticks and mortars or bricks and mortars. Much of the online shopping is occurring. So that may be something that will be revisited. I need to please allow me. I need to reinforce that what it says in the exclusive negotiation agreement, and Councilmember Catalano indicated it, that the developer could file an application. They would pay for all the staff time to review and critique that. They may actually, coming out of that staff critique, get a staff recommendation to the Planning Commission for denial, not to approve the general plan amendment or the specific plan amendment. If they still decide to go to the Planning Commission and try to overturn that, they can do that. No one needs to appeal the Planning Commission's decision because it automatically has to go to the legislative body of the city, the municipality, which is the City Council. Why? Because changing a general plan amendment or the general plan as well as the town center specific plan is an adjudicatory as well as a legislative act. And those acts can only be done by the City Council. So that's the process. The exclusive negotiation agreement, from the developer standpoint, they didn't want to go through the process here for consideration without knowing, A, what the price would be to fix in a price. From their standpoint, they don't want to go through the process and then reach a stage and suddenly the city decides to switch the price tag on them. You can understand that, hopefully, if you look at it from their particular standpoint. The other is they didn't want to go through a process and have the city starting to talk with someone else about bringing in a competitive project for them. They wanted to know that entering into the process at their own risk, that they would have the opportunity to be treated in good faith. That good faith may, in fact, as I indicated, be a recommendation by staff not to approve the general plan amendment. But we don't know enough about the project. Even at the staff level, the council knows even less because it's been articulated here because they have to be kept as a buffer. Our city attorney can respond to that if you want more information on that. That's called due process.
You just reiterated what we're saying, which is very simple. If I could, very simply though, 70,000
Excuse me.
square foot facility.
Excuse me. Yeah, please let him finish. And
When the city council, in defense of the city council, when it entered into the exclusive negotiation agreement, didn't know what the size of the building was going to be. The developer, as they were talked to, and the council might recall, that the developer said, well, it might be 2 or it could be 3 stories. I understand the size that you're talking about, Ms. Welch, and we were, surprised as well as others at the staff level that they were coming in with that. It's been called a big box. That big box, as it's been architecturally designed by their architect, as well as the massing of that building, is not in harmony with the town center specific plan. But they have to consider all those factors, whether they're going to adjust, whether they wish to continue and take the risk. It will be several hundreds of thousands of dollars if they decide to actually file a formal application, which would then be subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, which is the environmental review, address other impacts that you folks have suggested regarding that. And as I indicated, they may get a recommendation for denial, but that's the process that was initiated. And so, as I indicated before, the council really can't talk about the project because they don't know enough about the project. They've not been privy to the limited information that we have even had at the community development staff level.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. You want to ask you to come to the mic, trying to address all the questions you still have.
Jim Gamble again. I am just wondering, I just want to, this part of the record is, we've got this 2-story building behind the bocce ball courts, and those bocce ball courts will probably be impacted even more if this goes through. But why are we even, why does something like this get even proposed and not swatted down right away? When we have another big box building over there that's on, they'll be across from each other, and it's a fraction full. It's just crazy that this would even be considered. And what's going to happen to all the other small businesses, which Mr. Reyes told me that he's practically going to give away the retail. So then you've got people moving over there, and then these other landowners or lot owners over here have buildings they can't fill. They're going to sweep right through this town. They're going to develop every empty building.
That's the type of impacts, that type of input and those types of impacts that would be analyzed in the process of looking at whether or not that development is going to fit into Clayton's future and be approved. So again, we wanted to make sure we got lots of public involvement by getting this out as soon as possible. Those were those conceptual meetings. They didn't go as well as we had hoped. But that was our intent, to get the developer out in front of the community where they want to put this development, and then finalize the plan if they want to move forward. And when we say move forward, we just mean move forward to submitting a formal application. They are under no, they understand the risk is on their side now. We might not ever ultimately approve this, but the decision on moving forward on submitting one is certainly up to them as a potential developer. What?
Yeah. My name is Bill Evenson, McKinley Court here in Clayton. Just wanted to add one comment. The developers of this project, as are often the case in commercial real estate, have proposed something that is probably wildly out of scope for our town. And that's a common tactic. And then, of course, they gauge the response of the town and the city council, and then they dial back to what their original plan was. They shoot for the moon, and then they dial back. They can't get 3 stories, so they'll go with 2. They can't get 95 beds, so they go with 60. This is a very common practice in commercial real estate development. And if you buy into it, I mean, then it looks like a win when they say, well, we'll do 2 stories, or we'll do 1 story, or we'll do 35,000 square feet. It's an inappropriate use for our downtown. Thank you.
All right, have we talked through this tonight? Other questions, concerns? We've certainly heard you. We'll take action as appropriate. Can't take it tonight, but we'll take it under advisement. Again, we are awaiting the decision on the developer on whether or not they want to move forward with a plan, and very anxious to see that plan, if it is developed, that is submitted. So thank you very much for coming. Want to encourage you to stay involved. Stay involved.
Thank you.
This is our city.
Thank you.
All right. Let's take a 5-minute break before we move into the next agenda item.
Nice to put a face there.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
And we are done with public comment, and going into public hearings, we have none. Next up is action items. Consider the introduction presentation of the proposed City of Clayton budget, fiscal year 2018-19, and the proposed capital improvement project 5-year budget, and set the date of Tuesday, June 19, 2018, for a public hearing to review and adopt the proposed city budget. Finance Director, Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor Hayden. We lost some of our audience, but I will continue on here, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Overall, before I get into it, again, I'd like to just summarize that we have positive news to report in this budget. It was overall, 18 was a pretty successful year, and 19 has some positive news to report with a balanced general fund budget with an operating surplus, which we'll get to in a later slide. So the following is just an overview of a summary presentation of a document, which is the proposed budget, which is over 170 pages long, appears to grow every single year. And the goal is to just summarize this in about 14 slides. So the following table is a 5-year budget trend from fiscal year 2015 going all the way through next year, which is fiscal year 2018-19. A summary of the city's entire budget in 4 basic categories, which summarizes 27 different funds, 2 of which are new funds. They were not included in last year's proposed budget. That's for the RMRA Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act account, SB1 monies. That's like, you could almost consider it a gas tax too. It was approved by the state legislature, as well as the pension rate stabilization fund, which was approved by the city council during fiscal year 2018 to address potential future risk with that, and to be able to handle fluctuations imposed by CalPERS. So in total, in next year's proposed budget, excluding the CIP, including the CIP and all of our special revenue funds and fiduciary funds, the total budget is about $13.5 million. That represents an increase of about 7.9% over the prior year's total adopted budget, which is primarily due to increases in the Measure J Special Revenue Fund as well as the CIP budget to accommodate planned appropriations for the completion of the Keller Ridge Collector Street Rehab and the 2018 Neighborhood Street Repave project, as well as the creation of the new fund, the RMRA fund that we just discussed for SB1. So the consideration of those 3 items resulted in that big increase. And we're going to get to why the CIP appropriations are climbing, and that's because ultimately we weren't able to accomplish some of those projects this year like we had planned to, and those are going to be rolling forward into next year's budget for completion. So just looking at the snapshot, the order by size is consistent with the prior year, which kind of indicates that there has been no operational objectives changed by the city council during the year. There was no significant changes from the plan that we adopted. The second slide is a summary of all fiscal year 2019 city revenues by fund, which excludes the CIP fund for our capital improvement budget, as well as all the fiduciary funds, because those are outside of the scope of the normal operating and maintenance budget and have a lot of either non-recurring capital costs or account for funds for benefit assessment districts and things that are outside of the scope of the general operating budget. So over 3/4 or 78.25% of total revenues are derived from actually just 2 funds, that being the general fund and the landscape maintenance district. So the general fund comprises 62.98% of the city's total revenue budget, and that pretty much accounts for all of the general purpose taxes, revenues, and fees, and other things used to fund basic public services, which we're going to cover in the general fund section coming up. Then the second category, composing 15.27% of total city revenues, is the landscape maintenance district, which we know is designed to capture all of the Measure H restricted revenues, which we're going to discuss later as well. And as you can see in here, we have the new fund, the RMRA fund, which accounts for 2.54% of total revenues. And those, just like our HUDA gas tax fund, are put in a restricted special revenue fund and can only be used for the intended purposes outlined in the legislation. So for repaving projects and potentially operating and maintenance pertaining to arterial roadways. The next slide is very similar, including all of the same funds, excluding the CIP and the fiduciary funds, just like the previous slide, but it's on the expenditure side of the equation. So looking at this, just like the revenues, the largest share of expenditures is still in the general fund at 50.87% of total expenditures, so just over half of the city's budget. And we're going to discuss that way more in depth on slide number 8 coming up. Next, as we talked about, just like following the revenues, the landscape maintenance district accounts for 17.47% of total expenditures, which is for Measure H, which was approved for 10 years, extended for an additional 10 years 2 years ago. This is a slide we like to keep track of and present to the City Council and the public every year, which essentially shows a summary of general fund revenues and the growing, it was a growing gap, but now it's somewhat closing of a gap between hypothetical general fund revenues if they were adjusted for inflation with a base year of fiscal year 2002. Compared to the actual adopted budget, with the red line representing the hypothetical revenues, taking fiscal year 2002 adopted general fund revenues and adjusting those for the annual Bay Area Consumer Price Index, and the blue line fluctuating to address urgent needs, of the city during those times. So. Really what this indicates, we have a number at the top, the $909,000, that still shows that the city is falling somewhat short of the inflationary basis, but we are still able to provide the essential services with limited resources. So we're not above and beyond the inflation, and when we're still working with limited resources, we're not running a fat organization, as some people would like to accuse organizations of running. This slide we like to show every year. It's just a summary of how the basic Prop 13, passed in 1978 by the voters, 1% ad valorem property tax is shared amongst the various local, regional, and state entities in our region. And on average, the city of Clayton gets only 6.6 cents of every dollar that is collected for the ad valorem tax. Which puts us fifth in line of all of the recipients of those funds, before us being the Mount Diablo Unified School District, the Contra Costa Fire District, K through 12, County General Fund as well. So as such, the city of Clayton is still considered to be a low property tax city, even though people here would argue differently if they just look at their property tax bills, but we do get a very small share of that $1 ad valorem tax. That 1% ad valorem tax. So for instance, comparing our share to cities such as the city of Berkeley gets 40.3 cents of every ad valorem dollar collected, which is over 6 times what we get to use for general operating purposes such as public safety. Similar to that slide, this slide is a pie chart showing how the local 8.25% sales tax is divvied up between all of the recipient governmental agencies that are all responsible for different public services. And in this pie chart, the city is third in line, and our share of that is the 1% local Bradley Burns share of the tax, which that 1% basically means we get 12.1 cents of every sales tax dollar. We, of course, track sales tax closely, and because our share is quite small, and staff is constantly tracking, potential growth here. And of course, there are risks with this category declining as the economy and market continues to move to an online-based market, much of which is not taxed at all. Luckily, some of these large retailers like Amazon and Nordstrom, they do have agreements with the Board of Equalization in California where they do pay sales tax, and that is shared for essential public services, but many of them do not have those arrangements. So we will continue to monitor as the economy shifts to a more online-driven one. So the next slides kind of move forward to the nuts and bolts of the general fund proposed budget, which is we're starting off with the revenues, which is a total of $4,689,190. So the largest share of the source of general fund revenues at 21%, coming in at about $985,000, is property tax in lieu of VLF, with VLF being vehicle license fees. So essentially, this is a source that was derived when the state forced a swap of we used to collect VLF revenues locally, and in 2004, the state essentially took those through legislative action and said, well, you can have some of our local property tax, the state general fund property tax in lieu of that. So at first, we thought that there was going to be a loss for the cities, but it's the fact that it's our largest driver. We are still generating quite a bit of revenue through this, even though its growth is based and capped on Prop 13 principles, unlike VLF that grows based on the dollar value of the cars that are purchased. The second category is for just the secured property taxes, excluding the property transfer taxes and unsecured taxes, which are much smaller than this. That comes at 28.7% and an estimated $867,000. After that, at 12%, we have the city's franchise fees at $561,000, which makes up 12% of the revenue budget. And that is really derived from franchise agreements that the city has with our cable, electrical, and gas utilities, as well as the garbage franchise agreement that's currently with Republic Services. The fourth largest item is the sales taxes at 10.2%, which we just discussed previously. And the last one I wanted to bring up is the city's share of the RPPTF funds, which is the Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund. So once the redevelopment agency was eliminated and all the debts of the RDA are paid annually, whatever's left in the pot of that former RDA money is shared amongst all of the taxing entities, of which the city of Clayton gets a small chunk, less than about 7%, essentially. So again, we're always monitoring risks with these revenues and reporting to the city council annually and showing you how much of the pie they all take up. This year, there's no big fluctuations to report. However, as sales move more to the internet, sales tax could decline. With the eventual loss of with the eventual dissolution of the successor agency, the city is going to be losing the admin fees that come out of that, which used to be $250,000 to fund general services. Next year, because of a cap imposed by the State Department of Finance, instead of the $250,000, the city will only be getting $234,000. I project that will continuously decline until its eventual elimination. I think in the budget we put a fiscal year 2023. So that's eventually a risk that we will have to face, but we have some time.
It's finally done.
I believe that is fiscal year 2023.
Thank you.
It is in the budget document specifically, but eventually that will go away. That will be offset by an increase. Once we lose the administrative fees, there will be essentially more money in the RPPTF pot that's shared amongst all of the taxing entities, so the school district, the city of Clayton, the county, but we only get a return of that of about 7%, so we still have a big loss in that. But, that's many years from now, and that could be offset by growth in, property taxes and in lieu of VLF and things. So the next slide here is a summary of proposed general fund appropriations by department, of which there are 9 departments. And in total, the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 general fund budget includes appropriations of $4,587,220. So the order of the share of each of the departments is consistent with the prior year, indicating there hasn't been any changes or unforeseen fluctuations or any policy direction from the City Council that is significantly different than planned. However, I will point out it is unusual for this slide for the police to take less than a 50% share. Last year, for instance, that number was 53.3%, and we're going to be getting into that more in depth on the next slide here. This slide is a year-to-year comparison, prior year, fiscal year 17-18, compared to next year's proposed budget. And currently, the increase is projected to be at 2.97%, which is actually less than the April to April inflationary adjustment, which was 3.22%, published by the United States Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So this increase, the 2.97, is primarily explained by post-drought conditions at the Clayton Community Park. Now that the state has lifted those drought restrictions, the irrigation at the park is normalizing, and the council already did approve during fiscal year 2018 action to normalize it already at mid-year for this year. So that is a spike that we do anticipate having to make sure that the Clayton Community Park is rentable and it's available for the public to use, as well as our ball field users. And the other explanation for that hike is of course, the CalPERS imposed unfunded actuarial liability hikes for our Tier 1 miscellaneous group. So again, in the last slide, we talked about that it's unusual for the PD to take up less than 50%. So the reason it's less than half is because of 2 items that are happening, and one of those is because there's a non-recurring reduction in CalPERS imposed UAL billings next year, and that's because the Tier 1 Public Safety Side Fund unfunded liability will be paid off at the end of this fiscal year. It's basically paid off for when we move into next fiscal year. So the city does experience savings in that, which we projected in last year's budget as well. The other explanation for that is that the proposed budget assumes status quo labor negotiations with labor terms with the Police Officers Association, which is the labor agreement for the city's 10 sworn police officers. Currently, a tentative agreement has been reached between the POA, the Police Officers Association, and the city manager, which is expected to be going to the city council soon. But that has not been incorporated into the general fund proposed budget yet, because that would be a little bit presumptuous on my part. So once we consider those factors, I did the math and they jump right back to above 50%. So.
Excuse me, and there still are sufficient general fund monies to cover that MOU with the Police Association.
Thank you, Gary. And this slide right here, to kind of support Gary's fact, is a summary of the bottom line for the general fund next year. The most important slide, I'd say. So for next year, the proposed budget includes a budgetary surplus of $101,970, which we talked about assumes status quo labor negotiations. However, as our city manager has emphasized, that is sufficient with the current tentative terms that have been reached and will be proposed to the city council at an upcoming meeting. So that results, when we account for the proposed operating surplus for next year, that results in a projected general fund reserve at the end of next year of about $5.55 million as of June 30th, 2019. One important thing to point out, which we always like to show the public and the city council, is that the beginning fund balance is net. That $5.4 million is net of the action taken by the city council to utilize general fund annual excess for urgent unmet needs, which they've now approved. You've now approved 3 different instances, and even being net, it is well over the size of an entire year's operating budget. So that current figure up there, the opening balance for next year is 1.19 times the size of proposed general fund appropriations next year, which is a healthy figure to show, and it indicates we can operate, if worse came to worse and we had zero revenues for next year, we could operate an entire year on reserves alone. Now I should also point out that's rare when we look at other larger agencies around the city of Concord, Walnut Creek. They usually have a fraction of their operating budget. But for a city of our size, that's important because we don't have a lot of options if we lose Safeway or if we lose some key revenue sources, if there's a recession. So we need to have a healthy reserve. And as one of the council members has brought up in the past, if there were to be a large landslide again, we may wipe out half of that. So it's important as an insurance reserve to not use it all up.
I actually believe they said they'd wipe out all of that.
All of it, yeah. It could. I don't know.
It wouldn't be half.
Yes. So I'm sure the city engineer has more specific numbers on a damage scenario, but yeah, absolutely. So it's good that it's there, and it's a reflection of good policies over the years that the city council has approved. So now moving away from the general fund, which is like the lifeblood of the city of Clayton, I'd like to focus on a couple other funds that have some activities planned for next year. So looking at the landscape maintenance district, which is the special revenue fund for the Measure H restricted parcel tax. Next year there are 4 projects, capital projects, that are being planned. These are actually rollovers from the prior year adopted budget, which was largely due to a shift in operational priorities this year in that fund with turnover in the Public Works Department as well as with the City Engineer Department, ultimately resulting in, the city still fully plans to propose these to the City Council, is my understanding, but unfortunately, although it was designed for these to be completed in the current fiscal year, that did not happen, but the appropriations are lapsing and then rolling into next year's budget. And the largest one in there being the downtown planner project for the downtown area. And then right after that is the removal of the 18 eucalyptus trees in the open space areas and hills. That specific project, for instance, was kind of overseen by our maintenance supervisors, and we lost both of them this year. So we have high hopes with our new ambitious maintenance supervisor that that's going to be commencing next fiscal year.
Question before you leave.
Yeah.
The downtown planner replacement, does that include all the ones around the Grove Park?
I believe that includes all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and also to point out, the proposed capital appropriations for the LMD next year are almost a third of the total appropriations for that fund at 31%. So it is planned to invest those monies into the community, into capital purposes. The next slide is a summary of the capital improvement program projects that are planned for next fiscal year. And these are largely funded by restricted revenues that the city receives from the state or from the county through local or regional ballot measures, including the Measure J transportation taxes, the HUDA gas tax, which is the highway users tax account, the RMRA gas tax, that new funds that we are getting now, a Measure J grant, as well as some federal funding through the local streets and roads shortfall monies that the city plans to receive from CCTA, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, OBAG 1 monies. And then in addition to that, we also have the El Molino Drive sanitary sewer improvement project, which is estimated to cost $520,000 next fiscal year, and that's going to be funded by an agreement with the City of Concord, so it's going to be fully reimbursable through their sewer enterprise funds. So the projects up there that are going to be funded by the Measure J, the restricted gas tax monies and local transportation ones, are the Keller Ridge Collector Street rehab at $930,000. The Pine Hollow Road upgrade, which was just going to be in the design phase next year, and then transitioning into the capital phase in fiscal year 2020, when the city will become eligible for additional federal monies. And then on the top, the 2018 neighborhood street repave project. And of course, as every year, the city anticipates setting aside an additional $6,000 for the ADA compliance program. That's for ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act purposes along our arterial roadways, and then $21,000 from a PG&E set aside for the utility undergrounding program, of which there's not sufficient monies yet to do any utility undergrounding.
So Kevin, we're showing the El Molino Drive as part of our budget because the work is done in Clayton, even though it's paid for?
Yep, because we have control of it. The city council will have the discretion to approve the contract once the bids are received, and we have total control. And it's actually essentially the city's monies through the city's sewer rates that Concord is holding in their enterprise funds that we're getting. So Concord is reimbursing us, but it is city. It's earmarked for us. It's our money. Good question. The next two slides provide a summary of the city's status of the CalPERS administered pension plan, unfunded actuarial liability, and its budgetary impacts. City staff likes to analyze and monitor this closely due to the risks that we have when the CalPERS board decides to lower the discount rate or reduce the amortization period on all of their assumptions, or when interest returns, when investment returns from CalPERS are not what they projected. That's why we always have to be able to demonstrate to the city council that we're monitoring this, and it's being controlled, and it's not going to cause any cuts in the city budget. So currently this slide shows an 8-year summary of the Tier 1 miscellaneous and public safety unfunded actuarial liabilities as published by the most recent CalPERS actuarial report in August of 2017. The top line is the blue one, which is the public safety Tier 1 actuarial UAL, unfunded actuarial liability, and the red line represents the miscellaneous share. So currently, as you can see, there is CalPERS projects that there's going to be a downward trend in fiscal year once they publish the June 30th, 2017, as well as the June 30th, 2018 actuarial reports, and that's largely because the implementation of the fixed dollar UAL payments that the city started incurring in prior years, which we're going to get to in the next slide. So looking at the latest actuarial report, the CalPERS is always kind of running behind because it takes a long time for them to pull these numbers together for us. The latest one published was for the year ending 6/30 of 2016, and the next 2 years are projections. That's why I have a little asterisk next to there. So, you could say that is hopeful, because that's not based on real numbers. That's just what they project. I will say that the returns that they got in the market the most recent year were very high. But because of their smoothing processes, I don't know what that's going to do to the unfunded liability immediately next year. I'd be curious to see in the fall of 2018 when they publish the report, I'd be curious to see if it really did go lower in 17 versus higher. Because if it always goes higher and they're always projecting to us that it's going lower, then we may want to.
I know I ask this every year, but as a finance manager, you don't trust them, do you?
It's difficult.
I was going to ask the confidence level, but it doesn't sound high.
There's a lot of policy changes that their board can approve that changes everything. So you plan for one thing and then they lower the discount rate, and that's why staff has proposed previously when there was options on how to address this matter. One option that came on the table is, do we open up a irrevocable trust fund with CalPERS and send them money to lower the unfunded liability, or can we internally take some action and create an internal service fund to set up a pension rate stabilization fund? The city council was in favor of the staff recommendation to go internal and keep the money here, set the money aside in an internal service reserve fund so we can stabilize our general fund budgets should CalPERS's estimate of declining unfunded liability situations not come to fruition. We have a reserve, which the next slide kind of talks about as well. Because we didn't want to send CalPERS the money and then the things out of our control happen and the discount rate change or the amortization period be lowered even more, reduced, and then all of a sudden we have a larger unfunded liability. So we felt like we had more control and we trusted our ability to manage it better. Yes, Councilmember Diaz.
Excuse me for asking the obvious question, but back to the former slide on the public safety and miscellaneous unfunded trend. So it's actually, the total is a sum of both, is that correct, or 4.5 million approximately?
The total, correct.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and actually, as of 6/30 of 16, right there, that's when they had real results. The status of the Tier 1 public safety liability, the funding status was 71.9%, and then the funded status of the miscellaneous plan was at 72.8%. So, as a general rule, the utopia is always that you want to be 100% funded. We're taking out PEPRA, which it happened in 2013, was an attempt to normalize this. The establishment of the internal service fund to normalize future budgets was an action to address it. The creation, the City Council's creation of a Tier 2, even before PEPRA went into effect, was an action to kind of cap this from going. So the goal is to bring those percentages up, of course, and we'll continue to monitor it next year. Specifically, if it goes below a 70% rate, that would be alarming. So, but we'll know more. And last year we actually, last year we did provide a staff report that summarized a little more in depth on where the city stands with this unfunded pension situation. And at that time, we concluded that it's not going to be detrimental to the foreseeable future general fund budgets. So looking at the next 5 years, but of course we want to think long term above and beyond that. So we'll report that again in the fall once it becomes available, and then if new action is needed, we can recommend such or hear that from the City Council. The following slide, I should point out as I was going through this, actually, unfortunately, is a copy of the prior year. But generally speaking, the trend is the same. I do have on page 71 of the proposed budget, you'll see it's the same slide, but we've extended it through fiscal year 2023. But what is on the slideshow right now, unfortunately, I realized as I was looking through this, it did capture the prior year information. But the general information is the same. Just some of the numbers have changed a little bit. And for the next presentation, when this goes to proposed for the public hearing, I will be sure to include the corrected slide. But ultimately, what this illustrates is the city-wide, so not just the general fund, but all of the other funds and operations that the city accounts for, including the landscape maintenance district and the gas tax fund and the neighborhood streetlights restricted fund, the city-wide pension cost over the past 12 years and projections for the next 3 years. So due to the environmental changes with CalPERS in 2013, you can see that there's a huge reduction in the city's pension contribution costs, which was a direct result of PEPRA being approved by the state legislature, as well as the attrition of a lot of the Tier 1 employees and replacement with more affordable PEPRA or Tier 3 employees right there. However, that was ultimately eliminated by CalPERS when they realized they weren't collecting enough because the new, more affordable employees that were coming in with lower contribution rates wasn't building enough reserves to hedge against this unfunded liability with the Tier 1s. So in fiscal year 2016, CalPERS created the fixed liability UAL billings, which were totally fixed dollar amounts. It used to be a percentage of payroll, but then they addressed that. That's why you can see the huge spike that was entirely out of the city's control. And after that, you can actually see we were able to sustain in the current year an increase because of these UAL hikes and as well as the lowering of the discount rate. And then there's a decrease in next fiscal year, which pertains to the payoff of the public safety side fund, which we talked about earlier in the presentation. And it should be noted too that although that's great news, it is non-recurring in nature because then they hit us again to pay off the unfunded liabilities. The good news with that process is it is supposed to address the funding status issue and bring us from a low 70s percentage higher. And the good news, yeah, I have to see, yeah. At least locally, the good news is that we're still able to sustain a healthy budget with an operating surplus, and even longer-term projections, as I said, included on page 71 of the proposed budget document, the attachment to the staff report. It still is normalizing. So staff will continue to monitor the more 5-year and longer-term projection of this to make sure that we can stay on top of this.
Kevin, I'm sorry, which did you say is the correct one? The one
on page 71,
71, yeah.
Of the
I see that.
Proposed.
Is that the correct one?
71. Yes, that one goes through fiscal year 2023, okay. And that's the one that should be on the slide. Okay. But what I was trying to point out is at least you could see the trends are consistent with the one. All the historical information is there. We do have the same dip in the budget document that's attached in fiscal year 2019, and we also demonstrate that it's non-recurring because in then 2020 it goes up again. So we talked about the City Council approved the establishment of a pension rate stabilization fund in the current fiscal year 17-18, and because of 2 set-asides that the City Council approved into that fund from general fund excess in fiscal year 2015 as well as fiscal year 2017, we are opening that fund with a balance of just over $170,000 for next fiscal year that is totally restricted and available to help normalize future budgets if we need it. And that will continue to generate interest earnings, and right now we are in a climbing interest rate environment, so that's positive news that we have control of that, as opposed to if that were sitting in a CalPERS irrevocable trust. Once you send it there, you're never getting it back. So that concludes the presentation of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2018-19. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Budget Subcommittee, Mayor Hayden, as well as Council Member Catalano for your time and all of your valued input, and the City Manager for all of his direction and professional input in review in this process. So every year it's a good process, and it's mostly good news to report for as far as fiscal year 18-19 goes. And with that, I'll pass the item back to the City Council for discussion.
Julia, you want to comment on the meeting, or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot to add. That was very nice, thorough explanation. I mean, we did spend a couple hours on a Friday afternoon, a couple of weeks ago, going through sort of page-by-page review. I mean, everything I think to us looked to be very consistent, nothing out of line, whether you're looking at the current budget or kind of looking at a comparison to prior year or years. So I think it all looks good in that sense. A couple maybe minor interesting things, and like I said, minor in the big picture, but interesting points out of there. I mean, one of the things that we must mention was in terms of the revenue projection, one of the items that is a little bit more vulnerable is the sales and use tax. But interestingly, I think as compared to prior year, there actually was a slight increase in that number. So, that sort of an interesting little fact. And then the other thing that I think was sort of something to kind of, I think, keep an eye out for, or something that we'll have to deal with in a few years, is the street light assessment district. I think that fund is sort of little by little going more into negative, and I think in a couple of years we'll have to deal with that in some way or another. Again, it's not huge dollars in dollar amounts, but something we'll have to look at. But overall, I mean, I think, like I said, we had a very thorough review on that Friday afternoon, and I think everything from the subcommittee perspective looked good. So
I certainly agree with that, and also point out that Kevin continues to be conservative on the revenue side and overly optimistic, or not optimistic, but stating the expenses, making sure that's covered for sure, even with the revenues that are projected. So
I like to plan for the worst.
Yes.
I just want to say, ever since, Kevin, you've come on board here, the budget process is so much more easily understood, and it is a great testament to the job you do, that we are in a good shape. You and Gary, obviously, and the staff, we say it all the time, but you guys are working on a shoestring budget, and you're making it work. And I know that there's hours and hours that you and Gary spend doing that stuff and putting it together. But as Keith said, you're making sure that we have a balanced budget and that we can survive. And that is just fantastic. And this citizens should know that no matter how much we're paying you, we're getting a good job.
Thank you, Councilmember Shuey.
Gary?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to piggyback on what Councilmember Catalano talked about, the sales and use tax. There is legislation that's been introduced in Sacramento that will create winners and losers, oddly enough. How's that strange in Sacramento? But one of this particular bill would change the distribution of sales tax from the point of transaction to the point of delivery. So you can see that cities who have chased retail all those years and whatnot may now be on the phone frantic, whereas like cities like Clayton, where our business is residential primarily, and yet we know that our folks are online buying stuff and having them delivered, that could be a windfall for us. But that's kind of a toothpaste
Who's leading that? Is that because of Amazon and all that stuff where you don't really have, but who's pushing that?
I'm not certain yet. There's the League of California Cities has asked for a webinar, and and then was an odd follow-up to that. The executive director of the League of California Cities, because that was sent to city managers, and then she came on board and said, please, city managers, get on this, because as you can tell, some cities who are highly retail and whatnot could lose significantly based upon how the whole e-retail commerce has been conducted.
And I'm sorry, but it may be too early, but so if you walked into Target in Walnut Creek, would that count there, or would they ask you for your zip code?
Well, if you go into Sticks and Mortars, that would be the point of sale. But this is talking about the online, because online is where they're located. But then it would come to those where it's delivered. So then we can help to offset some of all the road conditions for all the delivery trucks in town.
Good. That would be wow.
Anyway, it's just interesting on what's happening in the economy today.
Jim?
I just want to clarify something on page 9, and that's the downsizing or downtrend on the police department budget, 4.5% negative, and that's because we're shifting to PEPRA as opposed to the Tier 1, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's not because they're getting less than they need to run a efficient department.
But we may see this trend increase as some of the Tier 1s continue to move on.
Well, actually, if I could, if the Tier 1 employees, as they leave or they retire, there will no longer be the contributions coming from those individuals, and at some point in time when there's no more Tier 1 employees with the city, what will happen is CalPERS will then change its formula for those cities to say you now have a fixed payment cost because that UAL has still not been retired.
Yeah. That's what they realized when we went to that downward trend over on this slide from once they implemented PEPRA in 2013, it went down because of all the PEPRAs coming in and their percentage of pay contribution being so much less than the Tier 1s, which for some cities, the public safety Tier 1s were at like 50 to 60 cents of every dollar. Of every dollar earned, they would have to set aside to just the pension contributions. And then CalPERS realized, hey, this isn't working out for us. So they redesigned it, just as Mr. Napper said, to recover it through these fixed dollar amounts. And that's why I hesitated to say it will continue into the future, because CalPERS right here in fiscal year 2020, they're already kind of correcting it again, even with the payoff of the side fund. But it's certainly, that negative percentage doesn't indicate at all that they're getting less resources or anything. It's just we're seeing savings because of these two items. So, good question, good observation.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. Once again, I appreciate the narrative that you provide, explaining the numbers to give us a higher degree of confidence in what we're looking at here, that you're protecting the city. And the explanations break it down into easy to understand language, so that's appreciated as well. So looks like you've given us another proposed budget that's very reasonable and provides sufficient protection to cover all of our expenditures and identify the revenue that's going to pay for them appropriately, so appreciate that. I didn't hear any proposed revisions or amendments, so I'll take a motion then that we set the...
Mr. Mayor.
Public comment.
Public comment? Excuse me.
I was amused at slide 14, if you want to throw that up there, the title on slide 14.
You need this.
Yeah, that's because, yeah. Because it's a prior year. Yes, that's a.
I was going to mention it, but I decided not to embarrass you.
Because it is the prior, because it's accidentally the prior year one, which is my fault when I was putting this together. That was observed last year.
Thank you.
And yes, it's because the logo is covering. It is rates, but it feels like a rat, but it is a rate.
I thought that was pretty apropos.
Well, apparently it's for sale, so Ann, tell us which one you want. Money's no object there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You close public comment. I'll make a motion.
Close it, yeah.
I'll make a motion to set Tuesday, June 19, 2018 at 7 p.m. in Hoyer Hall, 6125 Clayton Road as the date, time, and location of a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 city budget.
Second.
We moved and seconded then that we set Tuesday, June 19th, 2018, 7 o'clock in this location, Hoyer Hall, 6125 Clayton Road, as the time, date, and location of the public hearing then on the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 city budget that we reviewed this evening. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right. Very good. Thank you. Next item is talking about our summer schedule. So Gary, I appreciate you identifying what may occur on these various dates to help us make those decisions. And I believe you were suggesting that it might be easier to be consistent and go with the second meeting in each of the months, canceling the first meeting.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. I think I've outlined what items we're tracking for which meetings. And it appears to me the meeting nearest July 4th has traditionally been one that folks have canceled for either for vacations or preparation for the holiday. So staff's recommendation is that we need at least one meeting per month to handle some of the items. So we would recommend cancellation of Tuesday, July 3rd, Tuesday, August 7th, and Tuesday, September 4th. And that means, those months, July, August, and September, the second meeting in each of those months would be held.
I'm not going to be there for the second meeting in July. Just so everybody knows, as long as we got 4 others. But I'm gone the 13th through the 22nd.
Okay. You might not always be able to meet all the meetings, but...
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm just,
okay.
If there's multiple problems, then...
Have we heard from Councilmember Peters at all about it?
The one that she would not be available for is Tuesday, August 7th, and that's one that we're recommending to go dark on, but she would be around for the others.
I'm okay with that, with the understanding I'll miss that July.
Okay.
So in the interest of full disclosure, I should be here on the 17th, but I'm figuring out my mid-July dates right now, so I may be out of town, but as of right now, I should be here. But so I don't think that's a...
That's the one you
Sounds
might
like
miss
the
as
other,
well?
yeah.
Oh, I'm definitely missing that one.
But sounds like there's at least other 3, so it's not a problem in that sense.
What do you have, Gary, is anything urgent in July?
I'm just the 17th is the noticed hearing on the geological hazard abatement district. So that's already been set as a public hearing.
Okay.
And been noticed to the folks, the residents in the district.
Okay. And if you're comfortable, apparently we do need a motion to cancel those meetings.
So moved.
Second.
It would be the first meetings then in July, August, and September. So we would hold our meetings then, continue the one we have already scheduled for June 19th, and then July 17th, August 21st, and the second meeting in September. Okay, moved and seconded that we approve the cancellation of July 3rd, August 7th, and September 4th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you have public comment?
Yes.
Well, I guess that's good.
Does that mean that the?
Well, you got to stand up at the mic.
Does that mean that the city council is going to restructure the residents' comment to be 6 minutes instead of 3 minutes, since we only have half the meetings? I'm busy composing a speech. I'm just saying.
3 minutes has been sufficient in the past,
I make mine short and to the point.
All right. Take it under advisement.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. It's been moved and seconded then that we go with the new calendar that was proposed. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed? Okay. Very good. Any council items that you want to address in upcoming meetings at this time? Closed session none. Before we adjourn, I did bring up that we had been invited to attend a special guided tour of Black Diamond Mines, and the Park District did contact me and said that any weekend day in July, with the exception of Sunday the 14th, would work. So I'll send a message around to see when people are available.
Okay.
See if you, was there, I sensed that there was interest in doing that. I did.
If I'm available,
Very
that'd be cool.
interesting.
Yeah.
Would Sundays work better for most people, or do you care? Saturday?
Just depends on the weekend.
Yeah, it really does.
Okay. Okay, I'll put it out there. All right then, we are adjourned until our meeting on June 19th. Thank you.